Welcome everyone, this is a Legacy School Science lesson for Biology Chapter 5 on Human Influences on the Environment. This is part 2. For this part you will need your Science Checkpoint Book 3, pages 73 to 84. Water pollution. Fresh water. Fresh water such as streams and rivers have been used from the earliest times to flush away wastes. Over the past few centuries, many rivers of the world have been polluted by a wide range of industries, including textile and paper making plants, tanneries, and metal works. People in many countries have become aware of the dangers of pollution and laws have been passed to reduce it. Ways have been found to prevent pollution occurring and to recycle some of the materials in the waste. The most harmful pollutants in water are PCBs and heavy metals such as cadmium, chromium, nickel, and lead. In large concentrations, these metals damage many of the organs of the body and can cause cancers to develop. PCBs are used in making plastics and along with mercury compounds and taken in by living organisms at the beginning of the food chain. They are passed up the food chain as each organism is eaten by the next one in the chain. This leads to organisms that at the end of the food chain having large amount of toxic chemicals in their body, which can cause permanent damage or death. The careless use of fertilizers allow them to drain from the land into rivers and lakes and leads to the overgrowth of water plants, including algae. This is called algal bloom. When these plants die, large number of decomposing bacteria take in oxygen from the water. The reduction in oxygen levels in the water kills many water animals. Phosphates in detergents also cause an overgrowth in water plants, which can lead to the death of water animal in the same way. This is excessive use of fertilizers leads to algal bloom in rivers and kills fish. Seawater. The pollutants of fresh water are washed into the sea as rivers reach the coast, where they may collect in the coastal marine life. The pollutants may cause damage to the plants and animals that live in the sea and make them unfit to be collected for human food. Large amounts of oil are transported by tankers across the ocean every day. In the past, the tankers crew flushed out the empty oil containers with seawater to clean them. The oil that was released from the ship formed a film on the water surface, which prevented oxygen from entering the water from the air. It also reduced the amount of light that could pass through the upper water of the sea to reach the photoplanktons, which are tiny floating plants, and allow them to photosynthesize. The problem of this form of oil pollution has been reduced by adopting a load on top process, where the water used to clean out the containers is allowed to settle and the oil that has been collected floats to the top. This oil is kept in the tanker and is added to the next consignment of oil that is transported. Occasionally, a tanker is wrecked at sea, and there is an oil spill at an underwater level. When this happens, large amount of oils may spill out onto the water and be washed up onto the shore. This causes catastrophic damage to the habitat, and even with the use of detergents and physical removal of the oil, the habitat may take years to recover. Indicators of pollution. Some living things are very sensitive to pollution and therefore can be used as biological indicators of pollution. Lichens are sensitive to air pollution. Where the air is very badly polluted, no lichens grow, but a bright green protostea called Pleurococcus may form a coating on trees. Crusty lichens, some species of which are yellow, can grow in air where there is some pollution. Leafy lichens grow where the air has only a little pollution. Bushy lichens can grow only in unpolluted air. Some freshwater invertebrates can be used to estimate the amount of pollution in streams and rivers. If the water is very badly polluted, there is no freshwater life. But if the water is quite badly polluted, rat-tailed maggots may be present. Bloodworms can live in less badly polluted water, and freshwater shrimp can live in water that has only small amount of pollutants. Stonefly nymphs can live only in unpolluted water. As we can see here, we have the biological indicators of pollutions. We have the plants and the animals, the insects. So starting from the clean air, we have the bushy lichens. As the air gets more and more polluted, turns to leafy, and eventually, if the air is very polluted, we have the crusty lichen. And then with the water pollution, we have the stonefly nymph. If it's around, that means the water is not polluted. And as the water is more and more polluted, we see the freshwater shrimp, the bloodworm, and in higher pollution of water, we have the rat-tailed maggots. Intensive farming. As the human population has continued to grow, ways have been found to increase food production by intensive farming. A feature of intensive farming is the use of fertilizers and pesticides. Fertilizers. When plants are grown for food, they are eventually harvested and taken out of the soil. This means that the minerals they have taken from the soil goes with them to the market, and there are therefore fewer minerals left in the soil for the next crop. Fertilizers are added to the soil to replace the minerals that have been taken away in the crop. They are added in quantities that will make sure that the plant grow as healthy as possible and produce a large crop. The amount of fertilizers added to the soil has to be carefully calculated. If too little is added, the amount of food produced by the crop, called the yield, will be small. If too much is added, the plants will not use all the minerals and they may be washed into streams and rivers and cause pollution. There are two kinds of fertilizers. Inorganic fertilizers, such as ammonium nitrates, are manufactured chemical compounds. And we have organic fertilizers are made from the wastes of farm animals, the manure, and the human waste, sewage sludge. Inorganic fertilizers can give crop an almost instant supply of minerals, as the minerals dissolve in the soil, water as soon as they reach it. It can be taken up by the roots straight away. The minerals in manure are released more slowly as decomposers in the soil break it down. Inorganic fertilizers are light in weight and so can be spread from aeroplanes and helicopters flying over the crop. This means that they can be applied to the crop at any time without damaging it. Manure is too heavy to be spread in this way and must be spread from a trailer attached to a tracker. If the manure was spread while the crop was growing, the tractor and trailer would damage the crop. So the manure must instead be spread on the soil before the crop is sown. This also allows some time for the manure to release minerals in the soil. Fertilizers and soil structure. A good soil has particles of rock bound together with humus, decomposed plants and animals, to form lumps called clumps. The clumps do not interlock but settle on each other loosely, with air space between them. The air provides a source of oxygen for the plant's root and for organisms living in the soil. The spaces also allow the roots to grow easily through the soil. The humus acts like a sponge and holds on to some of the water that passes through the soil. The plant roots draws on the water stored in the humus. In time, humus rots away, and in natural habitat, it is replaced by the decaying bodies of other organisms. When manure is added to the soil, it adds humus, and this helps to bind the rock particles together and keep the soil clumps larger. If the soil receives only inorganic fertilizers, the humus is gradually lost and the soil clumps break down. The rocky fragments that remain form a dust which can be easily blown away by the wind. Pests and pesticides. Fertilizers are used to make the crop yield as high as possible. The crop plants may, however, be affected by other organisms, which either compete with them for resources or feed on them. These organisms are known as pests, and chemicals called pesticides have been developed to kill them. There are three kinds of pesticides: herbicides, fungicides, and insecticides. Herbicides: when a crop is sown, the seeds are planted so that the plant will grow in a certain distance apart from each other. This distance allows each plant to receive all the sunlight, water, and minerals that it needs to grow healthy and produce a large yield. A weed is a plant growing in the wrong place. For example, poppies may be grown in a flower bed to make a garden look attractive, but if they grow in a field of wheat, they are weed because they should not be growing there. Weeds grow in the spaces between the crop plants and compete with them for sunlight, water, and minerals. This means that the crop plant may receive less sunlight because the weed shades them, and receive less water and minerals because the weed plants take in some for their own growth. Weeds can also be infested with microorganisms that can cause diseases to the crop plant. For example, cereals may be attacked by fungi that lives on grass plants growing as weed on the crop. Weeds are killed by herbicides. There are two kinds of herbicides: non-selective and selective. A non-selective herbicide kills any plant. It can be used to clear areas of all plant life so that crops can be grown in the soil later. It must not be used when a crop is growing, as it will kill the crop plants too. A selective herbicide kills only one certain plant, the weed, and leaves the crop plant unharmed. It can be used when the crop is growing. Herbicides may be spread onto crops from the air. Some of the herbicides may drift away from the field and into surrounding natural habitats. When this happens, the herbicide can kill plants there. Many wildflowers have been destroyed in this way. Fungicides. A fungicide is a substance that kills fungi. Fungal spores may be in the soil of a crop field, floating in the air, or on the seed before they are sown. Seeds may be coated with fungicides to protect them when they germinate. They are also applied to the soil to prevent fungi attacking roots, and are sprayed on crop plants to give a protective coat against fungal spores in the air. Insecticides. When a large number of plants of the same kinds are grown together, they can provide a huge feeding area for insects. Large populations of insects can build up on the plants and cause great damage. Perhaps the worst insect pests of all is the locust. A swarm of locusts can eat entire fields of plants. Insecticides are used to kill these insect pests. There are two kinds of insecticides: narrow spectrum and broad spectrum. Narrow spectrum insecticides are designed to kill only certain kinds of insects and leave others unharmed. Broad spectrum insecticides, in contrast, kills a wide range of insects, not only those that feed on the crop, but also predatory insects that may prey on them. If insecticides drift away from the field after spraying, they can kill other insects in their natural habitat. They can also be passed along the food chain. A poison in the food chain. In 1935, a Swiss chemist called Paul Muller set up a research program to find a substance that would kill insects but would not harm other animals. Insects were his target because some species are plant pests and devastate farm crops, and others carry microorganisms that causes diseases in humans. The substance also had to be cheap to make and not have an unpleasant smell. In 1939, he tried a chemical called dichloroethylene diphenyl trichloroethane, or DDT, each which was first made in 1873. DDT seemed to meet all the requirements, and soon it was being used worldwide. In time, some animals at the end of the food chain, the top carnivores, in the habitat where DDT has been sprayed to kill insects, were found dead. The concentration of DDT applied to the insect was much too weak to kill the top carnivore directly, so investigations onto the food chain had to be made. In Clear Lake, California, DDT had been sprayed onto the water to kill gnat larvae. The concentration of DDT in the water was only 0.015 parts per million ppm, but the concentration in dead bodies of fish-eating water birds called western gerbils was 1600 ppm. When planktonic organisms in the water were examined, their bodies contained 5 ppm and the small fish that fed on them contained 10. It was discovered that DDT did not break down in the environment but was taken into living tissue and stayed there. As the plankton in the lake were eaten by the fish, the DDT was taken into the fish body and built up after every meal. The small fish were eaten by a larger fish, in which the DDT formed higher concentrations still. The Gerbies ate the large birds and with every meal increased the amount of DDT in their bodies until it killed them. In Britain, the Bridgerine falcon is a top carnivore in the food chain in moorland habitat. Although it visits other habitat outside the breeding season, the concentration of DDT in bodies of female falcon caused them to lay eggs with weak shells. When parents incubated the eggs, their weight broke the shell and the embryo died. Biological pest control. Biological pest control is the use of one animal species to control the number of pests. In 300 CE, the Chinese began using biological pest control to protect their crops from mandarin oranges. These fruits are attacked by many insects, but it was discovered that a certain kind of large ant did not eat the crop but fed on the harmful insects. The ants were collected by filling sheep bladder with fat and putting them next to an ant nest. When the bladders were teeming with ants, they were collected and placed in the orange tree. Bamboo poles were placed from one tree to the next in the orange grove, so that the ants could move freely over all the trees and eat the pest insects that would otherwise damage the fruit. This form of biological control is still used today. The biological control of other pests did not begin in other parts of the world until much more recent times. In Australia, the prickly pear was introduced as an ornament garden plant, but it soon started growing wild and became a weed. A moth that has a larva that feeds on the prickly pear was released among prickly pears, and in time their number were greatly reduced. The perfect environment for growth. When plants are grown, it is made to ensure that the crop yield is as large as possible. Applying fertilizers help crop grow, and the use of pesticides keep other organisms from damaging the crop. There are, however, other factors that affect growth. There are the factors that affect photosynthesis, which are light, temperature, and the amount of carbon dioxide in the air. Chapter 1, Figure 5.8 to 5.20 shows the result of experiments investigating the effect of light intensity, temperature, and the concentration of carbon dioxide in the air on the rate of photosynthesis. So here we have the figures. They show that as the light is more, we have more photosynthesis. As the temperature is higher in warmer conditions, we have more photosynthesis. And as the level of carbon dioxide increases, we have more photosynthesis. Combining the three factors. The result of the experiment shows that the amount of light, the temperature, and the amount of carbon dioxide in the air all affect the rate of photosynthesis. This implies that the rate of photosynthesis can be increased to maximum by carefully regulating these three factors in the environment of the plant. These factors cannot be controlled in an open field, but can be controlled by using a glasshouse. This is the end of this session. Hope to see you again soon.